22 years old when I came to prison.
I was 30 years old when I went to prison.
I was at the age of 19. I had just turned 19.
Hi, I'm Chris, and I help life-sentenced men transition from institutionalized prison life back into society. Every one of our men has already served 25 to 45 years in prison. I serve on the board of the Corrections Transition Program at Everglades Correctional Institution in Miami, Florida. I teach these men life skills and how to speak, listen, and think, so when they get paroled, they become assets to their communities rather than liabilities of the state. Welcome to Men Going Home. I'm Chris Wolfe, and we've got a great show for you today because we are the only show that brings you access to a segment of society very few people know anything about. Men who have spent more than 30, 35, and even 40 years in prison. We'll talk to them about their crimes, their life in prison, and what their transition back to society was like after all those years. Now, before we introduce today's special guest, please welcome my good friend and co-host of this show, Andy Korge. Andy, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Chris. It's great to be here. You know, last week it was an incredible show with Michael, and I'm wondering what your takeaways were from that show. I learned after the show, which one of the things Michael didn't discuss was that his parents, his father was an engineer and worked at NASA Space Center. His mother lost their lives actually in a car crash visiting him at the penitentiary.
That's correct. And
he really must have held a lot of, being in jail. I think he was in jail 41 years from the murder he committed. I mean, a lot of emotion came out of him. The other thing I learned, and I'm interested of your perspective. The other thing I learned from that show was, how he had to find something deep within inside of him in order to really change and become the person he is today. Probably, I think he may be getting married this coming weekend.
I believe so. I think he might already be married. I think he got married on Valentine's Day.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was a great show. And of course, people that want to hear his story and hear our show at any time can always listen to the podcast on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play.
Yeah, he actually has tremendous guilt from the fact that his parents were killed visiting him in a prison, and he doesn't like to talk about it too much. He talked about it once when we did a radio show. He didn't bring it up last week, but he has tremendous guilt that they were visiting him and they were killed in a car accident. The other thing is that he believes, and he wrote that if a worthless criminal like him, can become a respectable citizen, people can change. And he has changed, and he has become a responsible citizen.
Yeah, and a member of our society, a productive member of our society. And at the end of the day, that's what we want. We don't want people at least I know I don't want people in jail in America. We want them out working and being good citizens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's introduce today's guest. John Vicente spent over 35 years in prison after he was convicted in 1983 of first-degree felony murder. At the time, the prosecution had no physical evidence linking John to the murder or any evidence other than testimony from the man who John witnessed shooting the victim. And the actual shooter was then able to plead to an 8-year sentence and was released after only 4.5 years. John is here today to tell his true story. So please welcome our guest, John Vicente. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much.
Hi, John.
Thanks for having me.
John, a lot of people don't understand the difference between first-degree murder and first-degree felony murder. Can you explain the difference, please?
Okay, first-degree murder is if some people are you might have a beef with somebody, and you bring a gun. You're licensed to carry a gun or whatever. Okay, and then inside of you, while you get in an argument, you pull out a gun and shoot the guy. Okay, felony murder is when you're going to do a drug deal, rob a bank, you're committing a felony. And then somebody gets killed, whether it's the person, even the person doing the shooting, the fault partners, the conspirators get charged with a murder, and it's called felony murder.
Yeah, we see a lot of that in the corrections transition program where guys were 16, 17, 3 or 4 of them robbed a mini mart. Somebody pulls out a gun. The other guys didn't even know he had a gun, but they all get charged with first degree murder, correct?
That's right. And then comes the plea bargains. Usually the prosecution will want the least culpable to plea bargain to, the most culpable to plea bargain to get the less culpable.
So before we talk about how the prosecution attempted to link you to the killing of this man up in the Orlando area, let's give people a little bit of context on your life, and then we can talk about your crime and your prison time and the rest. You were born in, if memory serves me correct, you were born in Havana, Cuba.
That's right.
Your family moved to Miami.
Yes.
And then you all moved back to Cuba after Fidel Castro took power, correct?
That's right. We went back on January the 6th, 1959. And my father ran the owner of a bus terminal, which is a hub for all the interstate travel in Cuba. And we had other properties, and, Castro started taking the properties and whatever. But when he took the bus terminal, my father arranged a meeting with Castro, about what he'd taken. My father didn't steal from anybody. He worked hard to build it up. And Castro said, this is ours, and this is socialism, and everything belongs to the people. And then, my father said, well, tomorrow I'm going to the newspapers to make statements that this is not what the people wanted. Should have free elections and not socialism. So Castro gave my father 24 hours to leave Cuba.
Right, because your father became disenchanted with Castro. He said, hey, this isn't what the people wanted. They wanted free elections. They don't want the government taking over businesses. They took your family's dairy farm and you had to move.
Yeah.
And then when your father confronted Fidel Castro personally,
right,
Castro said, well, thank you for helping me overthrow Batista. And because of that, I'm giving you 24 hours to get out of town or I'm going to execute you, correct?
That's right.
So there you have it. Now the family moves back to Miami, Florida.
Yeah, we were able to get out $60,000, and my father invested in the red tack furniture.
60,000 was a lot of money back then.
Right. Yes, sir. And him and his friend, the idea was that the United States would not allow communism 90 miles away. So in the furniture store was like every friend of theirs that came and got furniture. Hey, pay when you can. If you don't have no money, don't pay. A lot of it was charity. So the money dried up.
So the furniture store went out of business.
It went out of business.
How long did that take after you moved here?
Well, we bought it in 61. By 63, it was gone.
Now, the overriding theme I see in your life is that you feel you have this obligation to look for opportunities to provide financial support to your family, yes, even as you got older, not just your wife and children, but your parents, correct?
That's right.
Where did this come from?
Well, my father was kind of set the example. He was only willing to help anybody, not just the family, but the friends with jobs and opportunities, setting them up in business, giving them an education. And I guess I just followed right along.
Did you ever think that this belief that was instilled in you might have had some influence on you in your decision to enter into the drug business?
Yes, it did.
It did.
Yes. We can go into how it started.
Well, we will momentarily. I'll take you there in a second. But what happened first is you're now a teenager growing up in Miami, Florida. You go to LaSalle High School.
Yes, sir.
Where our co-host Andy Korge went to high school.
My alma mater. Yes.
And I believe you even knew his brother and sister.
That's right.
And you became a baseball star.
Yeah, it was naturally because I really just from playing. Back then, I worked after practices and games and worked on the weekend. So I really didn't have a lot of chance to go to gyms and work out or whatever, just a little bit at home. And that was it. And sports came easy to me.
So the Houston Astros organization takes notice of you and they start scouting you.
Yeah, they started scouting me in the 10th grade. And I first went to Miami-Dade. Then I transferred to Santa Fe Junior College. And then they signed me. And actually, I signed the contract in February. We already, it became legal. But I had signed like in December 1969.
So the Houston Astros organization signed you to a contract.
That's right.
And did they give you a signing bonus?
They gave me a $6,000 bonus.
Which was a lot of money in 1969.
That's right.
And what did you do with that money? Did you help your family?
Yes, I gave it to my father because he had medical bills to pay.
Wow.
And I took $1,000 and I gave down payment on a car.
Wow. So now for the next couple of years, you're playing baseball. You're traded to the St. Louis Cardinals.
That's right. After the first season, I didn't take baseball as seriously as many other athletes did. Like I said, to me, it came natural. But at that point, everybody's a star. It's done in high school, you're the star. Even you go to junior college, you're the star. But you get there, everybody's a star. So you got to bring your game up. And mentally, I wasn't prepared for that. I just thought that, I could sleep late and not really, put myself up to it. And mentally, it was like, for example, I would send my paycheck home and I would eat the stuff, the sandwiches and chocolate milk. And that's why I love peanut butter. I would, the peanut butter and salami sandwich or whatever they prepare in the clubhouse, that would be my meals.
It was such an admirable characteristic that he was working and your priority was sending money home to your family, including your parents,
Yes.
which you're a very generous man.
Yes,
And
thank
all
you.
that came to a halt because you got a letter from the United States government. And what did it say?
I was supposed to go to play AA ball that year, and I come to get my car, and my mom says, "Hey, there's a letter from the government." I open it, and it says, this was like April the 2nd. It says, April 16th, you have to be at Miami International Airport, Delta Airlines. You're flying to Atlanta, you take Piedmont to Columbia, South Carolina, because you're being inducted that day.
You were drafted.
Yes,
So the baseball career is over. You were drafted by a different organization.
that's right.
And at those times, there were no exemptions for being an athlete or anything like that. Right?
No, it was college. If you were going to
College, you were exempt.
You were exempt. Or if you have a physical disability,
Right.
or other stuff. The Cardinals were upset because I never told them I had a problem with the draft board. I signed right out of high school. I went and signed for the draft, and because I went back to St. Pete to see if St. Petersburg, see if they could do for me. And the firm director at that time told me they were very receptive. He says, we have spent between your training, your salary, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars because they considered both years with Houston and with the Cardinals. I went to spring training with a big league club. Right. And that's like really, a caveat because of the what you hear, what you learn, how you see people act. And they were upset that I didn't tell them because we could have put you in the National Guard unit and they had where most of the players which was in Little Rock, Arkansas. And he's, but still they go away for like two weeks or something.
But now you spend 18 months in the military.
That's right.
You get an honorable discharge. You served our country, but you were suffering from depression.
That's right.
What was the cause?
Well, I went from playing baseball to making $73 a month. So now I can't help my family. So that was a big challenge. And I would send that money home because I figured I would get enough, like in prison. 3 meals a day was enough for me, and a place to sleep. And it was very depressing that I went from making decent money to just $73 a month.
So you come back to Miami and you look for a job and you end up in the banking industry doing collections for Barnett Bank. Remember Barnett Bank?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, of course.
Yes, that's where I started. I got the job through playing. They had a softball team, and then when they gave me the job, they don't have a softball team anymore. But at that time, banking was each bank had its own board and its own entity. Now, the centralized banking in I think it's April 77 or May 77, the centralized banking which there's only one main bank and the rest are branches. So that's what happened at Barnett Bank.
But now you left Barnett Bank because they were pressuring you to play on their softball team.
Now
right? They told you future advances had to do with you being on the team, and you said, hey, I'm not going to take that, and you quit.
Yes, I turned in my resignation because I felt like threatened. Either you do this, do that. And I always had an excellent work record. And always the thing in employment opportunities always came to me, and I stayed loyal to Barnett Bank. And when I resigned, then everywhere I went, it was, I wouldn't get hired.
Mm-hmm.
Until a friend of mine who ran a finance company, he called for a reference, and he said, there's what they're saying is that all we can say he worked here, which is, it's like it's a bad reference.
It's a kiss of death.
Yeah, like blackballed.
Right. So you went unemployed for how long?
About 3 months.
3 months. And you have a wife and 3 children.
I had that. I had one at that time.
One
My
child.
son, right.
And you're 3 months unemployed. You're trying to provide for your family. And all of a sudden, the guys, you're 28 years old, and all of a sudden the guys who clean your pool say, hey,
Well,
can you get us a pound of marijuana?
Yeah. Well, actually, I had a cabana de Fontainebleau and an expense account from the bank. And then I used to sit down and talk to them. And like I said, they came and said, hey, we're talking about smoking marijuana and whatever. He said, one of the guys said, can you get a pound of marijuana? And, I thought it over. Who would I get a pound of marijuana from? Then I remember this guy that I knew, he was older than me, that I knew from making him a loan in 1973 when I was at a finance company. I said, let me call him on the phone. And the guy says, hey, by the time this guy's bringing thousands of pounds of marijuana every other month. So he told me, get whatever you want.
So just out of the blue, these guys ask you, hey, can you get us a pound of marijuana? You do.
Yeah.
How much did it cost you?
$200, and I sold it for $300.
Boom, $100 profit.
Yes.
Fast money.
Fast money.
Wow.
But it
So
helps.
that was your first drug deal.
That's right.
And then, and the pool guys, so now, did you make a conscious decision? Now you're not working. You realize I can make some money doing this?
Yes. I figure, well, if I can't get a job legally, I have to make some money. And even though I still tried to get a job for a few months, and I figure that this is not working, these same guys came and asked me, can you get some cocaine? And I made a phone call and I got it. And, after a couple of months of this, I said, well, maybe this is, the route I should take.
How much cocaine did they ask for?
A quarter ounce.
A quarter ounce. And how much did that cost back then?
$250.
$250, and you sold it for?
$400.
$150. Boom.
Quick money again.
Quick money. Now, did you think, hey, I'm not supposed to be doing this. This is illegal and I could go to jail?
Yes, but Miami was so wild, and I figured, well, they got a lot of big fish going around.
Right.
They're not, I'm doing it. And if I do it like a business where, not everybody knows about it and you keep a low profile, I can get away with this until I can do a little better.
So now when you were at the bank, you actually hired 2 guys to do collections for you.
That's right.
Credit card debt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Repossessing cars.
right. And these guys, what you didn't know is they had their own little drug business going and some bigger deals.
That's right.
And they asked you to get drugs and you became basically their supplier, correct?
Yes. At the beginning, I was their supplier, and then we, moving much smaller amount, much higher amounts. I went from like a quarter ounce to a kilo of cocaine at the beginning from night to day. Now you're talking, $40,000-$50,000.
A kilo.
And a lot more money.
Yeah.
I always thought a kilo was 2.2 pounds. You say no.
It's a little, actually 2.2 tenths of a pound.
So these guys ask you to find 300 pounds of marijuana.
That's
Where do you find 300 pounds of marijuana?
I called the same guy. I called him and he says, listen, he was somewhere in North Miami off 95. Listen, just go there. And I called the guy, tell him to give you 300 pounds of marijuana.
Wow.
And
How much does 300 pounds of marijuana sell for?
well, the same. But this one he gave it to me like for 150, and I sold it to these guys for 200.
Wow. Business is taking off. You're doing well?
Yes.
Talk about that.
Well, like I said, that deal was my last marijuana deal because it was bulky. And they gave me a Monte Carlo, and this was at night.
In Miami?
Yes, in Miami. They were by right off Dixie Highway and about 67th Avenue. And I'm going to North Miami.
We're by Toys R Us. I'm kidding.
The thing is, I don't check the car.
Right.
And the Monte Carlo doesn't have that huge of a trunk. So I get it, pick up the marijuana, say it doesn't fit and all of it doesn't fit in the trunk. I throw it in the back seat.
Jeez.
Now I'm driving back at 95 and as I'm getting off on Dixie Highway, I see all these police cars passing me and you know, lights going and whatever. So there's a Winn-Dixie 7-Eleven on 117th. You make a right on 17th Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And because my wife had texted me that, you know, that I heard that something was happening in South Miami. So I called her on the phone and she tells me about it. And I said, yeah, I saw it happening. Well, when I get to the place, I find out it's like 2 blocks from all this police cars that are like cordoning off the area. And then I found out that one of the taillights wasn't working.
Oh.
And I said, this is it for me. I can't take any more chances.
And that was your last marijuana deal?
That was my last.
Because marijuana wasn't as profitable as cocaine, correct?
No, it wasn't.
So now you just start selling cocaine exclusively.
That's right.
So what you said was that you were actually, you were buying your materials at the Pampered Chef in Coconut Grove.
Well, I went to the Pampered Chef in Coconut Grove and I bought every sifter that they had.
Right.
And then I would take let's say I started, you know, doing 1 kilo cocaine, and I would run it through a big sifter, which would separate the bigger pieces. Then I run it to another one, all the way until I got to the powder. And then I would go to this place in North Miami Beach on 163rd called the Little Coin Shop, and I buy a bottle of Sumacaine for like a couple $100.
You were cutting the cocaine.
That's right. And because the price of Sumacaine went up when people started using it as cut.
Well, man, back up a second here, because now you're doing exclusively cocaine in your house.
Well, I had a place, in Banjan Bay, apartments right off Biscayne and 64th, and that's where I worked out of. I never worked out of.
You
my
didn't
house.
work out of your house?
Never.
And you had something like he referred to as a press.
Yeah.
So you were making those bricks of cocaine and wrapping them just like the ones we'd see on Miami Vice. And you were making those.
That's right.
1978 was a good year. How good?
How good? Well, in cash, as I told you, one day I counted $1.4 million, and just the other hundreds told the people helping me to keep it.
What did you do with it? I mean, how did you just hide the money? I mean, were there banks that were taking this money from
Well,
you?
I started sending into 2 accounts I had in Panama, and the other one, a lot of it was partied away or giving it to families. You know, all of a sudden, people started showing up, friends, guys I went to school with. You know, I was.
You said you were starting to take care of 30 people, so it was 1.4 million, but the money was going out as fast as it was coming in, no?
That's right. That's correct. Then I got into you get into the fast life here today, New York, Chicago, and, cars, Jaguars, Corvettes, Cadillacs, Lincolns.
You were buying a lot of property?
I bought a chalet in Beach Mountain, North Carolina. The Carvel Ice Cream on 74th. I fronted the money to somebody, modeling agency in Coconut Grove. I bought the house in Eastern Shores.
So you
were these businesses? Were you using them to sort of filter the money through, to wash the money?
some of it, a lot of it, I just told the people, whenever you start making money, start paying me back. I never asked for interest or anything, just to help them.
That was from you when you were a kid. You were benevolent with your money.
So you were flying high. You're living a flamboyant lifestyle. You're going to Studio 54. You're spending a lot of money. You're buying regimes. You're buying cars for people. Then all of a sudden, boom, 1978, your brother-in-law gets busted by the DEA. What happened?
It was Valentine's Day, 1978. He gets busted. He gets charged with five counts: trafficking, possession, distribution, conspiracy, racketeering.
So he's looking at, 30, 40 years in prison.
That's right. And I'm in the courthouse downtown. In fact, I ran into one guy who was working for the FBI that I knew from school. And he, what are you doing here? And I told him, well, I'm thinking of studying law at the University of Miami, and I want to see how, criminal trials and bond hearings and whatever. And as I'm getting, that was in the elevator. I get off the elevator. There's a bench there. I'm sitting there, and I see my brother-in-law and the co-defendants being let out, like the elephants. One guy handcuffed to the hand of the other guy. And one of the guys with him says, the Colombian guy says, "Oh, there's your brother-in-law. We're saved." And everybody's looking at me like, he put me on Front Street, and that I didn't like. But
you got the case dropped for him.
Yes.
What did you have to do?
It cost a lot of money with the attorney. The attorney had an investigator.
How much did you pay the attorney?
$150,000.
Cash?
Yes.
And then the case was dropped.
For another $75,000.
And then you also made sure that the papers didn't
It wasn't
print
in the papers.
There was no news. How did that happen?
Well, I guess the investigator took care of everything. But
how much did they pay the papers and the news people?
I have no idea. I was just happy that that it didn't happen. And that same day when I brought him to my house, and he called his wife, that's the day my dad found out that I was in the drug business.
He never knew before?
Nope. Because I told him I had a repossession agency in case he saw me with different cars and whatever. I said, I'll repo that car. And
it must have been very emotional for you.
Yes.
What did he tell you?
And he told me I couldn't walk into that house again unless I get out of the drug business.
How much cocaine were you selling in 1979? You said 20, 25 keys?
About 20 keys a month. I would take 15, make 20, and sell the 20.
And I think you mentioned to me that for every 15 kilos you sold, the profit was $400,000?
That's right.
And you were selling 20 to 25 keys a month?
Yeah, average 20.
Wow.
Yeah, because I would pay 40 for 15. That's 600,000.
Right.
And then I make 20 and sell it at 50.
Wow. But you also said this was the beginning of the end because you were also using a lot of cocaine and smoking a lot of marijuana, correct?
Yes. I lost control of the use of cocaine, and I always was healthy and athlete, and I would never put anything in my body that would hurt me or harm me. And just cocaine took over. I couldn't stop. It was 2 or 3 days using cocaine. In fact, I'm probably the only person that called 911 twice and nobody answered. So, because I thought I was going into shock because my not drinking anything and
dehydrated.
And dehydrating. I never forget one time I got a glass and put it in the ice maker in the refrigerator, and when I brought it out, I started flying all over the place because I couldn't control myself. And I always said, I need help, but I never took that step because, like I told you, once I smoked a couple of joints, I ate, and I was good to go again.
And throughout all this time, you still had a family. You maintained the wife and the kid and all that.
Yes. Towards the end of 79, I still hung out with my kids, whatever, but I started separating, from my wife because she certainly didn't agree with my lifestyle, because, they're partying. Sometimes the work gets around, and I'm disappearing for days.
Let's talk about the real beginning of the end here. July 9th of 1980. All right. You had met a guy from West Virginia who was a real bad dude. And he was, you started selling cocaine with him. He was from West Virginia.
Yeah.
Talk about the flow of cocaine and then the flow of money with this guy.
Okay. At the beginning, I met him in Tampa. So the cocaine would be taken to Tampa. And then it was his problem taking it north a couple of times. I went with him just for the ride to see how he would go. They drive it up, fly it up, send a Greyhound. When they flew it was to Pittsburgh, which is the biggest airport in Western Pennsylvania back then.
Right.
And these guys control Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. They were the Whitehill gang, and the guy I did business with, Bill Whitehill, the head of that gang, who had done 13 years from death row in West Virginia. He killed his wife because she caught him with his best friend in bed.
Right.
And I guess he paid all the governor, whatever, and he got a pardon.
Now, so the cocaine is going from Miami to Tampa, Tampa to West Virginia, but you don't want to create the same path back on cash. So the cash is coming through Orlando back to Miami, correct?
Yes. Whitehill's put his son and girlfriend rented a nice townhouse in Orlando, so that we don't have the same people seeing each other. Same people going one way, and if we come the other way, coming from West Virginia, and that's how we got the money. Then the money would come back to Miami.
Okay, so now what you would do, you would travel from Miami to Orlando, pick up the money, and bring it home. Now,
Bring it home.
you hired somebody,
Yes, because
a man named Juliano. You hired him, and his job was to go to Orlando, get the money, and bring it back.
exactly.
What happened? What had happened with Julio and the bad dude's girlfriend?
Okay, I was using him too to deliver the coke to Tampa, and I told him, I said, "These are some bad people. If you get to this apartment and Bill is not there, and it's just the wife," and I took him to a motel, and I said, "You come to this motel, you rent a room here, and you call me." Well, that happened 3 or 4 times, but around March or April of 1980. The wife was there, and he was like 53 years old, and she was like 25, 26. And somehow they convinced her to go to the motel and party.
This was the bad guy's girlfriend, or
That's right, wife.
right. So now Juliano, who you hired to get the money, he connects with her and says, "Hey, let's meet at the hotel, and
Yeah.
have a party, drugs, sex."
Yep.
Okay.
And then,
The bad guy finds out.
well, before that, how he found out, Bill's wife calls Darnell, the girlfriend of the son,
Right.
who was in Orlando, and said, "Hey, John's delivery guy, he's got cocaine. Come over here, let's party." So she came over, and they party. I don't know anything, because certainly he wasn't going to tell me. And then when the women had a beef, one the other one, the girlfriend of the father of the son tells Bill Whitehill, "Hey, we did this, in Tampa." So I find out because I'm at a houseboat that I had across the street from the Seacoast Towers
On the intercoastal
in the
waterway.
coastal.
So the bad guy finds out that his girlfriend and your delivery man had an affair,
Yep.
and he calls you, and he's mad.
He's mad. He says his wife's name was Cece. He says, "I'm Cece here. I'm carving my initials on her forehead, and I don't know what. And you're delivery guy, has sex with whatever." And I said, "No, I couldn't. I didn't believe it, because I told him how these people were."
Right.
And that's a protocol you don't do in the drug business. You don't dump what you eat.
Right. Of course.
And so eventually I didn't know what happened to her, because I never heard from him again.
But then things sort of cool down, and a little time passes, and you're back up in Orlando to pick up some money.
Yes.
Your guy Giuliano's there. The bad guy's son is there, and you've got to take Giuliano back to the airport to fly back to Miami. What happens?
Yes, well, we're in the car, and I've been in Orlando 6-7 times. And everybody can tell you, my whole family can tell you, I'm real bad on address. I get lost. I had a real problem community control in Tampa. I would get lost everywhere. And so she's directing me, and all of a sudden, we're in the middle of this dark road. George, the son, says, "Oh, John, I got to take a leak." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he's sitting in the back seat behind me. So I get out. I said, "Oh, wow, might as well take a leak too." So he goes around the back of the car, and he said, "Oh, John, I took a leak on myself. I have to throw me the keys to the trunk because I have to change."
Right.
So I throw him the keys to the trunk. Now I'm waiting, and the trunk of the car, it was a Camaro, it's up. And next thing I see him going is to the around to the door, and he's opening the door and pointing to his girlfriend who's behind Julian. She pulls the lock on the door. He pulls him out, and he says, and now he's got a gun in his hand. I said, "Wow!" No, but I mean, in split seconds, he says something like, "I'm going to bust you if you can," and start shooting him in the head.
So he just opens fire. He opens fire on this guy, shoots
That's right.
4 or 5 times.
That's right.
And kills him.
That's right. Then I wasn't counting the bullets or anything. So I try to like sneak my way back into the car because I had a 22, not a Derringer. They used to call it a hooker gun. It got 5 shots, 22s. And when I sort of like leaned here, like I'm looking for the keys to the car that had fallen on the floor of the car, I'm trying to like feel it. I don't feel it. George says, "Hey, is this what you're looking for?"
So he had
His girlfriend. I pulled it out and I'm giving it to him. He says, "We don't have no beef. My father respects you to the ultimate, but we're through and they still owe me a lot of money. We're through dealing." And they said, "Just drive us to Miami and drop us off. We'll go from there."
And it was your feeling that his father told him to kill this guy?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course.
So, all right.
So you were mighty lucky right there.
I think so.
Did you feel like, wow, this is my second chance in life, maybe?
Yes, because once they had that little gun, I felt that I'm up. It's up to them to whatever
Yeah, they could have killed you in a heartbeat, and nobody would have known, and they'd be gone.
Yeah.
Andy's right. You're very fortunate that night. So they go back to wherever they got to go. You come to you travel to Miami, but you're on the run now because the police are looking for you.
Yes. Well, I found out like they got out. Julian's wife called the police up there. They found the body. I called her and told her your husband had been killed. That's what she called up there anyway. She started screaming. So, and I said, this is how it happened. So they got arrested right away.
Right.
George Whitehill and his girlfriend.
And they
left for
you.
West Virginia. Yeah.
They accused you and said you were the shooter.
That's right. That they weren't there, that I left with Julian in the car, and that I was a shooter.
So you're on the run. Where did you go for 2 years? Almost 2 years. Where did you go?
Well, a couple of times I left Miami. In fact, I live by there now, in Miami Airport. One time I went to Bimini, where I had some friends in Nassau, but I missed my kids.
Right.
And I said, really, this is not the life. I figured if I kept a low profile in Miami, I made no enemies. I can lay low.
But they locate you, and they swoop in. Tell us about that.
Yes, I made amends with my father. I bought him a house on right at Village Green Elementary, North End. And somebody that knew me and told him that I was going to be there. So my niece comes knock on the door. I'm in the bedroom. Says, "Uncle, there are 2 cars full of people. Just start to run. They're surrounding the house." I said, "Oh God, that's me." My father didn't want to open the door. I said, "Dad, they're going. You don't know they're going to bust it down. Let's not make it any worse." And they had the homicide. 2 homicide officers from Orlando who were very upset because every time they came to Miami to look for me, they didn't get much help from the police.
Because you were very generous with a lot of organizations, and the police tended to like you here in Miami, correct?
Yes. Anytime like an officer, something happened, whatever, I contribute funds, food, whatever was needed to that charity or the officer's
Right.
family.
But you surrendered. You knew you couldn't get away.
Yes,
They handcuffed you, and then what happened?
They handcuffed me right inside the house on the couch. Then I guess the two homicide officers from Orlando took out their frustration of finding me, and they started whipping me, one with a gun and the other one with his fist. Handcuffed, they pulled my arms. I was handcuffed behind my back, and they pulled me by the shoulders, tearing both of my shoulders up. And that's where I got this here was a big hole. They busted my head up here and over the eye, and I lost all my teeth up here.
And you ended up at Jackson
In Ward
emergency
D.
room.
And in fact, the doctors there, he said, don't, they have the wheelchair and they have a handcuff that they put in your leg. He says, don't bother when you can't go anywhere, it's bleeding to death.
Right.
So I was, it was all sew up. And then up here, it was shave, because my hair was down here then. Shave and sew all over my head. And this here, they packed it the best they could and sewed it.
So now you got 3 strikes against you, and he's got 3 strikes against him. He's on trial in Orlando for first-degree murder. He's a Cuban drug dealer from Miami. What was that like?
Well, you could see the prejudice when they were picking the jury.
Right.
My attorney asking questions, does anybody, have any animosity to somebody being Cuban and whatever? And some people were expressed their frustrations with the Cubans, and because they try to link me to the Mariels, which in the previous 2-3 months, 2 of them have been convicted in Orlando, one of first-degree murder for killing a guy over a 6-pack at a 7-Eleven, and the other one killed and raped this school teacher.
Right.
And he got the death penalty. So when I came up, like I said, the prosecution focused on linking me to that type of people that came with Mariel, not realizing that I had served in the military. I came here very young, and I was a U.S. citizen. None of that was brought up.
But this was all about that murder that of your accomplice, the person that was in business with you. Had you ever considered cooperating with the police?
No, never. I never. First of all, I didn't do it.
Right. Well, that's why I asked that.
Okay, you can say, well, he's felony murder because money is illegal, but I didn't commit the murder. You want to try me for drug dealing? I'll go for that.
But when I read the transcripts that you gave me, I read the transcripts, and the prosecution is saying, we don't really think he had the gun. We don't really think he's the shooter. And the prosecutor said, but we don't have to prove whether he was the shooter or not, because it's felony murder.
Okay, yeah, that's
Correct?
what they pounced on. And during their trial, there were certain things that came up, like one of the jurors says, hey, because every before trial, they read the people involved in the case. So they read Darnell's name. The juror said, oh, he lives across the street. She lives across the street with her mother. I've been over there, and she said that she was involved in a murder from a guy from Miami, and that she was offered such a sweet deal to testify. Right. And that she was going to say whatever it took because they gave her 90 days in jail and 3 years probation, and she had only done 9 days in the county jail.
And what's fascinating, Andy, is that there was no evidence linking John to the murder, and the only evidence they had was testimony from the guy who shot him saying that John had done the murder. So 2 years later, the guy who did the shooting wrote a letter and confessed. He confessed and said that John had nothing to do with the murder and that he had done it. And a judge still wouldn't grant you a retrial, correct?
That's right.
Why?
The judge accepted. We had hearings. They harassed me to no end because they would set a hearing date, and I would have to bring, Bill Wyhill from West Virginia to testify because he was there when his son confessed, and the other woman who signed the thing, and we brought the chaplain from the VA hospital.
Right.
And that costs money. The prosecution pays the people. They have to come out of my family's pocket to bring those people down. oh, we need a continuance. They did that twice. Finally, the third time it happened, and they were grilled pretty strictly by the prosecution, and the judge was taking his time. So I put a written mandamus to make him rule. So he ruled. This all started like in '87, and now it's like 1990. He said, well, I find that the statement of George Whitehill would be beneficial at the time of the trial, but I feel there's insurmountable evidence linking me to the murder, and he denied me the new trial.
And it's just fascinating, Andy, because the guy who actually committed the murder blamed John, so he got a lesser sentence of 8 years, but he got out in 4.5.
Yeah. No, the thing is, he never testified against me because he got to trial and he says he don't remember what happened that night,
Right.
and he doesn't know me. So my attorney was not able to cross-examine the accuser, which is one of your first rights.
So there we have felony murder. You didn't kill this guy, but because of your connection in the drug industry, that was the link that the prosecution used. And it was a stretch, but they were successful in doing it.
Yes, maybe in Miami I wouldn't have been convicted, but they wouldn't allow a change of venue either. They wanted that
Wow.
trial in Orlando.
So now you're 34 years old. You've never really been arrested before,
No.
correct? And you're in state prison. Take us back there. What was that like? You're 34 years old. You're put in violent prisons. What were you thinking that first week?
Well, at first I went to Lake Boulder, which is a reception center back then that everybody went to. And I was there about 3 months because they put me to work in classification. I knew one of the aides in classification. He got me a job there, which was better than going to the kitchen from 2 a.m. to 7 o'clock the next day, sweeping and mopping and whatever. And after 3 months, they sent me to UCI, what is called the Rock.
As Union Correctional Institution, that's where they do death sentences.
Well, now they do death. Before that was at Florida State Prison. Now the death row is at UCI.
Was Ted Bundy there when you were at Union?
No, he was in Florida State Prison,
He was at Florida State
in
Prison.
death row.
How violent was UCI when you were there? Like, give people an idea of how violent that was.
He was considered in the top 3 violent prisons in the United States. I read a report from the Jacksonville Sun, I think the paper it's called, where there was an inmate killed every day, officers assaulted on a daily basis. And of course, they couldn't count how many assaults between inmates, happen daily. They had places, they had the tack plant where they made the Florida tacks was there. So, metal, you can make anything you want. If somebody pull out a small shank, and another guy pull out a sword because that's where all the metal was made.
And everyone had weapons there? All the inmates, more or less?
Well, more or less. The thing is, if you're involved in drugs, gambling, some sort of illegal activity, homosexuality or whatever, those are the guys that were usually in trouble. If you just stay to yourself, and like I told you, if they know that you're going to fight back, they won't mess with you because there's enough easy pickings that they don't want to deal with the person going to fight back. They got enough to take from somebody else.
I'm surprised that you said Everglades Correctional Institution was a violent prison back in 2005, because that's where our program is here in Miami. And you said because of gangs, that was a very violent prison.
Yes, and I got there in July 2005, and I knew it was a war. Officers, inmates, and then they had what is called a goon squad, and the officers were on steroids and whatever. And if they got hold of somebody, it was lights out.
You made the entrepreneur, always trying to take care of his family and his people. John made $40,000 in prison over a 6-year period of time, selling food from the kitchen when you were at Dade Correctional.
Yes,
You were stealing food from the prison and making money.
Well, I ordered the food, did the inventory, did the payroll for the inmates. They were making 14 cents an hour. I was a clerk, so I made 24 cents an hour. I did my boss's payroll, the food service people, the free people work food service. I did their payroll. So there were different ways. When I got hired, after about a month, the food service director called me into his office. He's a real nice guy. He used to be a retired colonel from a Kentucky prison. And he spent all day playing poker on the computer. So he says, I've seen your work. And if I had to hire somebody to do the work you do here, I would have to give him $600-700 a month. So as long as you don't hit me that hard, I'll give you a lot of leeway.
Wow.
And
Wow.
And I was there from 5 a.m. to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning because he got me a memorandum from the mayor of the prison that I could stay there all night if I wanted. And of course, when you were alone in there and you got keys to everything because I got to take the inventory. So you you prepare stuff to go out and sell in the daytime. And
John, you're quite an entrepreneur because you know what he did with the $40,000? What would you do?
Played the stock market. I don't know.
He became a loan shark in prison.
Same thing.
He became a loan
Same
shark.
thing.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated. I mean, how do you run a loan sharking operation in prison?
Well, what I do is usually you got to deal with the guys who do a lot of drugs or do a lot of gambling, and they need access to cash money. Now, back then there was cash money. You give them $300 on the first of the month, and they got to give you, depends how friendly you are with him or whatever, you got $500 at the end of the month. So either they can do a mail out to my family or give me cash in the visiting park. When his visitors come in, give me cash.
So you loan somebody $300 at the beginning of the month. So at the end of the month, they owe you money. How much?
Like I said, depends how friendly I am with them, between $400 and $500.
And you told me you never feared for your life in 36 years of prison, even though you were at some of the most violent prisons in the country. Why?
Never, because and it's not that I kept to myself. I was always involved in program, playing sports. I was on state teams, softball teams. And it's just a certain way that you have to be that you don't give somebody an excuse to mess with you. Your second character, your values. They see that, if somebody needs help, their vocabulary is not too good or whatever, and then and they need to write a request. They come to me and I do it. So there are certain things that you can handle yourself.
That's how you would explain surviving 36 years in prison.
That's right.
Which is not easy.
And clearly, you had good work skills.
Yes.
That you could have put to work in the real world, if you will, in an honest occupation.
Of course.
You also said the best quote. This is a quote. Best psychologists are inmates in prison, especially the black inmates, African American, Haitian, Jamaican. Explain that.
Because they can see the weakness. It's either like they can, I don't know if they can smell it or something, the weakness in people, in persons. And they got, like I said, they can talk to somebody and go around and around and around until they got control of that person. I've seen them control free people.
Wow, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
All right, let's talk about your transition back now out into the free world. You're in prison for 36 years. You've been incarcerated. You hear about the corrections transition program here in Miami. You might be released. You see a light at the end of the tunnel. How did you hear about the program?
Well, it's famous in the prison system, especially people with life sentence or eligible for parole, because everybody wants to get in it. And I tried to get in 2012 and the parole commission denied me. So I waited a couple of years and put in for a special hearing and just to be sent to the program. And it took me like a year to explain to my classification officer in the South Unit about the program, about parole, etc. Finally, she recommended me, like I told her, you're not recommending me for parole. You're only recommending me to go to Everglades to get into the transition program. And they had a hearing in 2016, and I got sent to Everglades to the transition program.
How long were you in the transition program?
2 years, about 5 months.
How many times have you been up for parole over the 36 years?
Well, I went twice, got denied. Then I had that special hearing. Then I had a hearing in September 2019, 2018, when they gave me the effective for February 28th and that 2019, and then I got parole.
So you were declined for parole twice.
Right.
Why?
They said I was dangerous and a gun was used in the commission of a felony.
That you didn't.
I was a threat to society.
And were any of the victims' relatives, did they show up?
Yes, they were made to show up. You know, they get paid and they're told what to say by the victim's advocate. But even in 2012, they really didn't want to show up. And because my family was there and they could tell, you know, their demeanor, and they kept looking at them and like looking down, that they really didn't want to get involved. And then soon after that, they sent, my son knew somebody that knew one of them. And the same word, he says, we'll never appear again. We have no problem with him getting released. Well, that's one of the things that motivated me to ask for a special hearing.
How many DRs did you get? Delinquency reports?
I have one.
One? What was it for?
6 hard-boiled eggs.
6 boiled eggs? They found them in your cell?
Yes, and they weren't mine. The thing is, of all the stuff they could have found always with food, it was 6 hard-boiled eggs that were my room partner. But he had so much food in his locker that he opened my locker, because I never locked my locker in any prison I've been, and that I put it on mine. And he was a gambler, so they searched the room and found the 6 hard-boiled eggs. And I said, God, one DR for hard-boiled eggs. They ever bring this up, you know, people would laugh. But believe it or not, in the first parole hearing I had,
yeah, they brought it up.
They brought it up.
Hard-boiled eggs.
He's still committing crimes.
Right. We've got a couple of minutes yet here, but you know, how about Dr. Sharon requires you all give back? What are you doing now that you're out? You were a liability of the state for 36 years. Now you're an asset of the community. Tell us how.
Okay, I want to thank Dr. Sharon, because, you know, without the program, without her, I would have never been able to get out. And I stay in touch with her. Not enough, because I know she's busy and I'm running around all day. One of the things that when the guys release on parole, first of all, I speak for the guys to help them get out.
Because you became such a good speaker at the Voices of Time Gavel Club.
That's right. And that's why thank you, because I could always speak, but not a lot of times make sense. I have ADHD, and I will go from one corner of the spectrum to the other, and he helped me a lot. But I pick up the guys at Everglades, but if they don't have family or somebody to pick them up, instead of your first experience is riding the bus to Tampa, I'll pick them up, take him to lunch, and then give them a ride to Tampa and buy him clothing.
That's great. So
they don't have to leave the prison with the prison clothing that they're given, sometimes 3 sizes too big, and then they look like clowns. So I get in touch with them, and they send me their measurements and whatever. I go shoes, socks.
That's great.
And
I know you go on Tuesday nights. I think you're going tonight to the prison.
That's right.
You're going to help
this
them
afternoon, 2 to 4. I went last week, but they had
there you go.
all kinds of excuses not to bring the guys. But at 2 o'clock, I'm going there today.
John, I've got 2 quick questions for you. But number one, all the money that you made in selling cocaine and the properties and the assets, what happened to it all?
Everything was lost. They between the feds and the state, they took everything I had. When I got to prison, I had $2 in my pocket.
Based on your experience, what advice would you give adolescents and teenagers today to stay out of prison? And what advice do you have for them?
Well, 3 years of living the life of fantasy, you could say, is not worth 35 years, 8 months, and 4 days in prison. It's not worth it. If you got any talent to do anything, I've seen great artists in prison. I mean, I've seen worse stuff at being sold on the street than in prison. If you have any talent whatsoever, and everyone got some talent, if you can speak, you can talk yourself into a job. Even if you have any skills, you just got to be a hard worker, show that you can. It doesn't matter criminal record. Like I tell the guys, I use being in prison to my advantage. I got people come work at that house, and in 2 minutes, I tell them, oh, man, I just got out of prison 36 years. I've gotten discounts. I've gotten guys to do better jobs than they did just because they I don't know, maybe they feel sorry or whatever. So I tell them, use it to your advantage. Now you got to know when to say it. I mean, you don't walk into a bank and say, "Oh, I did 20 years for armed robbery of a bank."
Right.
So so that's it. And I also I collect clothing and food and whatever, and take it weekly, usually on Thursdays, to this assisted living facility right off Chrome and Grossman Roads. I'm also involved. We're starting out Lifers Giving Back organization.
That's
with
fantastic.
3 or 4 guys that came out of the program. In fact, it's that you mentioned is to talk to the youth. Will be open.
Do you ever wish? I'm sorry,
Go ahead,
Chris,
go
but do you ever wish you had said yes to playing on that softball team at Barnett Bank?
Yes. Even not because I was in prison, but even in the hard times when I was on the run, I said, let's put it this way: one of the guys I hired to work in the bank, not the collections part, to work in the bank for me, he played. He was a good softball player. He played, and they made him the regional director of loan and summer lending for Barnett Banks just for playing the softball team. Then they made him a $250,000 loan unsecured to buy 2 gas stations.
I'm sure there were a lot of nights over the years when you were laying in your cell looking up at the ceiling thinking, why did I choose the choices I made? As Dr. Sheeran says, it's all about making bad choices and bad decisions. But John, you have been an outstanding guest here today. I want to thank you so much. I hope you'll come back at some point in time.
Sure, anytime.
Andy,
My fellow LaSalle Royal right over there.
there he is, alumni. Yeah. Andy, you're a great co-host,
Thank
and I
you.
thank you. Any other comments?
I mean, incredibly interesting story. I mean, captivating. And John, I just hope the rest of your life you keep doing the good things that you're doing, obviously, today. God bless you.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for tuning in to Men Going Home. Welcome you back next week for another episode, and we'll try to always provide an interesting show for you. Again, thank you. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good day. Bye-bye.